Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Devin Baxter Jones to the podcast today to talk about Junior Bonner, starring Steve McQueen and directed by the great Sam Peckinpah, released 50 years ago in August of 1972. How are we doing, Devin?
We are doing excellent today. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing okay. I'm very hot. There's no air in this room, and it's 100 degrees outside. So if I start sweating,
it's going to be like that for a couple days now, I bet.
And I would say of all the movies I've looked at for the podcast for the summer of 1972, this is one with the most heat in it, right?
Yeah.
The whole movie. It's all like a lot of outside and rodeo.
Yeah.
Like it feels sweaty, very mid-July, mid-August kind of a movie.
Yeah, definitely a sweaty movie for sure. Sweaty, dirty. You can almost smell the manure through the screen. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll dig into the movie in a moment. Before we get started, I'd love to just hear in general kind of like what got you into movies. Do you have a few favorites you can share with us? Just to kind of talk about your relationship with film.
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't necessarily call myself like a film buff, but I love a good movie. I've watched movies since I was a kid, and just kind of growing up, I was introduced to a lot of interesting ones early on. Like my first scary movie was The Grudge, and I think I was 11, and so that terrified me to no end.
The US remake with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a fun time, and definitely had some night lights installed after that one for sure.
That one's scary.
It's pretty terrifying, but my parents had this pretty interesting rule. It was never announced, but it was like no nudity in a movie. If there was nudity, I couldn't watch it. So, but that left a lot of things available. So, violent movies, free game. Nudity movies, no go. So I was able to watch, Pulp Fiction early on, but I couldn't watch Good Luck Chuck. So
okay. So real quick, what's your opinion about that? Because I had that with my parents too, and the older I get, the more I just don't understand that. It's like, yeah. I mean, I understand like sex scenes, okay, but like the idea that watch a violent movie where 1,000 people are annihilated, that's fine.
Yeah,
but a movie where there's one scene where a woman takes off her top, that's off limits. Like that just seems totally weird to me.
It's a little strange. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's a double-edged sword, I think, but eventually that rule dissolved once I reached my teenage years, and I was able to watch a whole spectrum of movies. Right. So that was great.
Would you say horror films is your favorite genre, or does it not matter the genre?
It actually doesn't matter.
Okay.
I like, as long as the movie can evoke something, which is interesting about Junior Bonner, because it evoked something in me. It's a good movie. So a lot of my like go-tos are Blade Runner. Blade Runner is one of my favorites. Chinatown. I think we talked about it when we first met. I love that movie, Chinatown.
We're 2 years away from that. That came out in 74.
Yeah, it's an excellent film. Breakfast Club, No Country for Old Men, and I'll throw in a couple oddballs like Mulholland Drive or The Godfather Part 2. Those are like,
you've named all great films.
Yes.
I know I can be
great taste.
I know I can be friends with someone who likes Mulholland Drive. Like that's like if someone's like, "Oh, that movie's stupid," I don't know what you talk. Like it's hard for me to get along with that person.
Yeah.
Which means I can't get along with my family.
Oh no.
Nobody in my family likes anything by David Lynch. They're like, "What's wrong with you?" And he's like one of my favorite directors ever.
He's a hard pill to swallow though for the everyday man.
He's not the best for like the casual moviegoer.
Right.
But those are all great. A lot of 70s titles there. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the 70s. That's why I do this podcast. And the deeper into the 70s, the movies just get better and better. So it's going to be really exciting to start getting into, especially 74 is like an insane year, like so much. And on and on. But today we're talking Junior Bonner. Had you heard of this movie before?
I had never heard of this movie. It was a shocker. I watched the trailer and I was like, oh boy, this is the movie.
Have you seen a lot of Westerns? You said you like, I don't know if we qualified it as a Western, but it's got elements of it, and that's No Country for Old Men from 07.
Yeah. Neo-Western, I would qualify that one. Yeah, I admire a good Western. I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly.
Okay.
I would say Dirty Harry's probably Western-ish. It's not a Western, but
yeah, it's got a Western vibe to it.
It's got the elements, yeah. But I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to a Western. Some of my favorite movies that have been coming out have been Westerns.
Oh, like in recent years?
Yeah, Hostiles was one of the ones that really blew me out of the water. That was a great one. But
one Christian Bale.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, no, Westerns are kind of hit and miss with me. Like sometimes, like especially if it's like a kind of a interesting take on the genre, violence. Like sometimes it can be really great, but other times, especially like some of those old dusty like 50s, 60s John Wayne Westerns are not not the movie I'll pick to put on.
Right. They're in a bar setting, they're great as silent films. Because they have the look of a Western and you don't care what they're saying, they're just doing the Western stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many classic Hollywood stars I adore. The one person I don't really follow that much, I mean, of course he's been in some great films, and it's John Wayne. Like John Wayne is not the kind of charismatic actor that I necessarily need to seek out his entire filmography.
Right. Because I think it's he might be a one-trick pony. You've seen one, you've seen them all.
Yeah, but The Searchers from '56 by John Ford is one of the great movies of all time. And The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance from '62, and there's some good ones in there. For Westerns, like horror films, I can put on anything.
Right.
Because if it's good, then if it's scary, I'm happy. If it's not scary and ridiculous, I'm happy. You can't really maybe one in every 30, 40 horror films is just bad and boring, but it's pretty rare.
It really depends on the production too,
Oh yeah.
That's a solid aspect. If it's a cheesy film, but it's got great horror, it's great.
Yeah. Horror films around this time are not great. Like 71, 72, there's a couple little gems, but until we get to The Exorcist, which is a year away, like the horror genre is kind of suffering right now. I feel like people talk about the death of the Western into the 70s, but some of like the best films I've looked at for the podcast have been Westerns. Sam Peckinpah directed a terrific film, Western from 1970. I didn't talk about it on the podcast. I watched it too late to do it, but called The Ballad of Cable Hogue, which is really interesting. And have you seen that one or heard of it?
No, I was looking into Sam Peckinpah as a little background, and I saw that one was in his repertoire, and I was like, this is a very interesting film. It kind of reminds me of the new Coen brother movie, Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It kind of has that like homage.
It's probably, I wonder if the Coen brothers had seen the 70 movie and like the title of that had been inspired by it. I'm not sure, but
yeah.
But so that's a really interesting film. And then one of my favorite discoveries is called Monty Walsh from the end of 1970. It was, I believe, the 5th episode I did for this podcast. Leave Marvin and Jack Palance, and it's just really interesting, and it goes to places you're not expecting. And so I wouldn't say the Western is super popular around this time the way it was in like the 40s and 50s, but we're still getting some good ones here and there.
Yeah.
And so that takes us to Junior Bonner, which stars Steve McQueen, who will reunite with Sam Peckinpah in like 4 months, because at the end of the year, we're talking their other 72 film that they made together, The Getaway.
Yeah.
Ali McGraw, one of Peckinpah's most famous films. Have you heard of or seen The Getaway?
I looked at the trailer. Okay. This is my only Peckinpah movie that I've been exposed to. So I thank you for expanding my horizons.
This is your first Peckinpah production.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and The Getaway did look very interesting as well.
Oh yeah, I saw it once a long time ago. I don't remember it much. It's definitely more of an action movie than this is.
Yeah.
But, so the thing about Sam Peckinpah, if you haven't seen his other films, is he's known for being a very violent director in terms of like Straw Dogs, which we talked about a few months ago with Dustin Hoffman, is a movie that's kind of slow for about an hour, and then it just turns into this violent home invasion action movie for the last 30-40 minutes of Dustin Hoffman just trying to keep these guys outside the walls. And then probably he's most famous for The Wild Bunch in '69. Have you heard of that movie, The Wild Bunch?
Yeah, I heard it's like a rompous movie,
Oh, it's crazy. It's like one of the first like movies in the age of the MPAA ratings board, where it's like really kind of flirting with that NC-17 X rating in terms of violence. It's very
maybe
violent.
we should reconsider our rating system because of this movie.
Yeah, it was like the first one of the first movies to really show like lots of blood on screen. You know, before 1968, you couldn't really do that. Like you couldn't really show a lot of blood. That's and then once you could rate your movie R or X in 68, 69, we started to see a little bit more blood here and there. And then the Wild Bunch really goes in that direction. So that's the kind of movie he's known for. And Straw Dogs, which came out at the end of 71, was so controversial that Sam Peckinpah said, I need to do something a little bit quieter, more laid back. And you can't get more laid back than Junior Bonner.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Yeah. I'm all for laid back kind of hangout movies. I was like, about an hour in, I'm like, is there going to be any tension of any kind in this movie?
And you realize, no, there won't be.
There's a little at the end. I mean, we got people brawling in a bar.
Is that tension or is that just great cinema?
Great cinema craziness.
Yeah.
In a way, I thought the most tension of the whole movie was if like his mom would go to Australia with his dad.
Yeah. Or would they even get back together? Yeah.
That wonderful scene on the staircase is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, and it has nothing to do with Steve McQueen.
Right, has nothing to do with the stars. Yeah,
where I'm like, oh, I'm interested. It's, you know, I'm like this movie should just like follow those two.
I think it's actually about them. Yeah,
it is kind of about them. It is weird. You're right. Like Steve McQueen is kind of the lead of the movie, but he's kind of a background, kind of static character.
Yeah. He doesn't. His motivation is just to ride sunshine one more time just to see if he can do it. You know, he's got his own pride, his own ego that he's got to fulfill. But his brothers, there's no regard to what his real estate brother's going to do, you know?
Yeah.
He's like, I'll punch him once in the face and bust a window, but you know, we're fine after that.
Yeah. So the basic premise is, Ace Bonner, the dad, he returns to Arizona several years after he abandoned his family. Junior Bonner is a wild young man, and as you just said, a little bit about his character. Against the typical rodeo championship, family drama erupts is kind of like the main idea of the movie. Kind of a family drama. It's not all about Junior Bonner, and like, I mean, he's like he has his motivations, and then he kind of romances this woman, but it feels kind of like a side plot. It doesn't feel like that's what the movie's about. It's not a romance,
right? It's kind of a fling.
Fling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't he ask her to dance? And she's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. She's making eyes on him all the time, you know?
It's baby blues, right?
Yeah. I think
his baby blues. He's got like those Paul Newman eyes. Like you can't look away.
Oh, yeah.
So here's some background on the film. So in the summer of 71, after he completed Straw Dogs, Sam Peckinpah, the director of Junior Bonner, he returned to the United States to begin work on this movie. The screenplay depicting the changing times of society and binding family ties appealed to his taste. He accepted the project, concerned with being typed as a director of violent action. Wild Bunch was his most renowned film, and now Straw Dogs was about to come out. Junior Bonner, apparently, according to this that I read, would be his final attempt at a low-key dramatic work. Like everything he made after this was an action film or a little bit more hardcore.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's like he tried one more.
I'll give you one more, guys.
It's like in high school and college, I made some short films, and I made two kind of like R-rated, kind of pushing the limit movies. And my mom said, "Could you just make one kind of like quiet, like PG movie?" And so I attempted it.
Drama.
I did attempt. I attempted like a quieter, like PG, like not like no swearing kind of. And I really didn't like the experience. And so I can see where Peckinpah is coming from. He's like, okay, I'll do one just to show. It's like when John Carpenter made Starman.
Yeah.
You familiar with the work of John Carpenter? Like he is very well known for his horror films and science fiction films, and Halloween's most famous.
Oh, yeah.
And then in 1982, he makes The Thing, which is one of his great movies, but it bombed when that came out. It came out right after E.T. opened.
Oh, no.
Which was the big blockbuster of the year. And everyone in the summer of 82 wanted to watch a nice alien not an evil alien.
Yeah.
That bursts through people and takes over their bodies. And so he basically took Starman from 84, starring Jeff Bridges, to prove that he could like direct a quieter kind of a romantic drama. Like he's not only a director of extremely violent, scary genre films. So directors do it all the time. Wes Craven made Music of the Heart with Meryl Streep, a quiet, music drama. Like directors can do more than the thing that they're known for.
Yeah. They say we have class. Don't worry.
It's so interesting to me how so many directors become kind of typecast like actors can be. And they're known for one thing and that's successful. And then they're just asked to keep doing that. And sometimes it's hard to break away. So here's Peckinpah trying to break away from what he's known for. And I could imagine some people walking into this movie in the summer of 72 expecting another Straw Dogs or a Wild Bunch. I didn't see, you watched the trailer for this? I didn't watch it, but apparently I read that they promoted Junior Bonner as an action film and like a suspense film with Steve McQueen.
Yeah, I think it had a couple scenes in the movie it had a couple scenes in the trailer that didn't actually appear in the movie, which I was surprised. I think there was a car going through some
like a car chase.
Yeah, like a car chase of some sort. I'm like, I wonder when that's gonna happen, but
like a footage, like footage from a different film that they're just like.
I think so. Some stock footage of a car jumping off a cliff.
Because I am watching this movie earlier this week. I'm like, how do you promote this in a way that you get people into the theater? I mean, it's like the only thing I could think of is like you promote it as a Peckinpah film and you promote it as Steve McQueen and to show lots of footage of McQueen. Right. He's also known for action. He's known for Bullet, which came out in 68, one of his most famous films. So. Because it's a pretty laid back movie.
it's a nice, Thursday night evening sipper. You open a bottle of wine or you open a bottle of whiskey.
Nice, like light Pinot.
If Shonda Rhimes isn't on TV, you put this on. It's great.
So I didn't look at like all the films that he made after this. I know The Getaway is just a few months away, but so I don't think he made a ton of films after this, but I guess this was like the last kind of low key movie he did. It was filmed on location in Prescott, Arizona. The director utilized many colorful locales and residents as extras in the film. I always like that when you watch a movie and it's shot on location. I tend to like, you can feel it. Like it's not something that it's usually something I notice when it's clearly shot on a studio lot that you can tell.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And that's actually one of the things that was that pointed out the movie to me was the setting. It was very real. It was very like set in a real town. All of the scenes of them herding the cattle and getting them into the pens and everything, it felt very, kind of like melodramatic, but there was tension, like someone could get hurt at any time. You could see it.
I mean, it's harder to gather up the cast and crew and go somewhere else. It's easier to just shoot on the back lot in LA, but especially a movie like this, I feel like the town is kind of a character. Like you can't replicate that in a back lot somewhere. Like you have to go there. And especially now, like we're kind of post like the 50s, 60s style of filmmaking where a lot of those movies are shot on a back lot because it was cheaper and easier. Like now, like in the 70s, you're not seeing that as much. Like I feel like most everything I've looked at for this podcast has been like shot on location.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like Deliverance, we just talked about, that will have aired last week. That's a very famous film from 72, kind of a horror film, thriller. And that's like clearly shot on location. They're not using a river at Universal Studios. And it just makes the movie more interesting. It feels more alive. So there were a couple people that were considered that didn't make it. The big one, Gene Hackman, was going to play the Joe Don Baker role of the brother, but Steve McQueen would not agree to Hackman's salary demands, and he vetoed the casting. I'm like, did Steve McQueen, was he a producer on this? Like what? Yeah. Like what? I guess because he's like the star, the person that's going to get butts in the seats. I guess he has the ability to veto someone. This would have been right around the time that French Connection came out, or even before, because I think this was shot This was shot in the summer of 71. French Connection came out, I believe, in October. So he wasn't a name yet. Why would Gene Hackman be asking for huge salary demands? That's weird, because we talked about him a few weeks ago on an episode about a movie called Prime Cut, where Gene Hackman plays the bad guy. And I read about that movie that he took that smaller role because he hadn't worked in a long time after French Connection. So I'm like, maybe it's because you're asking for too much money, Gene. Maybe that's the problem. But
he's got bills to pay.
Gene Hackman, one of my favorites, and he's still, as of this record, he's still with us. Gene Hackman, he's like 94,
still kicking it.
Keep going, Gene. I love it.
He'll probably be in the next voiceover for another Tarantino movie. Yeah, he'll do his cameo.
Gene Hackman retired in 2004. So he hasn't acted in a while, but he's still around, which is awesome. So let's see. Joe Don Baker, who did take the role of the brother, and Sam Peckinpah did not get along while filming. Baker had this to say about Peckinpah: "I didn't care for the guy at all. He was one of those little guys who tries to bully big guys, and he almost got his ass whipped for trying to do it to me. Every time I was going to throttle Peckinpah, Steve McQueen would come over and calm me down like a brother would." So, I mean, yeah, I could, like, just based on the 3 or 4 films of Peckinpah's I've seen, I get a sense that he's probably not like the best like actor's director. Like, I wasn't there on the set, but I don't get the sense that he's like the kind of director who's like really coddling the actor.
No, he's like, do your job. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
Yeah,
we're losing the sun.
Yeah, rumor has it that he drank up to 4 bottles of whiskey a day.
Where did you hear that?
I was looking on IMDb, and it said some sort
Peckinpah?
of about Peckinpah. Yeah.
4 what? How much whiskey?
He said 4 bottles.
4 bottles of whiskey a day? Like, wouldn't that just
something?
Wouldn't that knock you
along
out?
Those lines? I think it would, but it's.
How would you?
Peckinpah.
How would you be able to direct a movie?
I don't think he's intending to direct the movie. I think he wants the actors to make the movie. Do your job.
Yeah. No, I've been on some sets. I always like when you like, if you're never been on movie sets, you always believe that directors are just always like up and out of their chair and running around and bringing the actor over and whispering into their ear something. I've been on a few movie sets, and I typically would see the director sitting in a chair far away from the actors. And I watched the filming of this movie called The Cooler once with William H. Macy and Maria Bello.
Okay.
In like 2002. And I was there for about an hour, and they did a scene together in a restaurant, and they did like the scene back and forth like 5 or 6 times. I was watching. The director never got up and said a word.
Oh my God.
Like, I think they would just say, okay, let's go again. Okay. Yep. Okay, rolling. And I'm like, oh, he's not going up and like whispering into her ear. Maybe that was just a weird day, but
yeah.
But so Joe Don Baker was not happy with. I don't like. He's the kind of character actor you see in a bunch of stuff. I know he's the guy. He's in GoldenEye. I want to say with Pierce Brosnan from '95.
Okay,
he's been around for decades. And so he's the brother in this. Didn't like working with the director, but other people like working with the director because not only does Steve McQueen go on to work with Peckinpah again on The Getaway just a few months later, but Ben Johnson, who we're going to talk about at the end, he also is in The Getaway, and he was also in The Wild Bunch. So they couldn't have hated working with the guy that much. If any actors like repeat working with some like a director more than once, can't be that bad, right?
You have to understand. Yeah, there's got to be some sort of affection there. Even if you hate the guy, he's probably a good director.
Or maybe they just forget. Maybe like they forget that they didn't like it, and then they come back. They're like, oh, a job.
Right. That's true.
Let's see. So according to a biography about Steve McQueen, the closest McQueen ever got to an actual bull while making this movie was one called Docile Sunshine, who was fun, playful, and even kid-friendly. McQueen was not allowed to get near Evil Sunshine, who was the meanest, craziest bull on the planet. As a prank between shots, McQueen thought it would be funny to release Evil Sunshine into the bull ring. People climbed over each other to get out. The bull destroyed an expensive 35 millimeter camera.
Oh no.
Woo! So it's almost like there's more drama between that story and the Joe Don Baker story. I almost wonder if a movie about the making of Junior Bonner would have more drama in it.
It sounds like it's going to lean that way. Yeah.
It's like Gene Siskel's old rule. The film critic Gene Siskel, he would say, is the movie I'm watching right now is interesting as a documentary about the cast having lunch. Like just like a camera, like filming the actors at having lunch together.
Yeah.
Like, which one's better?
Yeah.
And sometimes there are movies where there's like an amazing ensemble cast, 10 amazing actors, and the movie's giving them nothing. So you wonder, you think like, man, like just like being a fly on the wall of the making of this would have been way more interesting.
Probably a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right. So a couple more things. This movie apparently, so I've been watching a lot of obviously 1972 films for this podcast. I haven't seen any of these, but apparently Junior Bonner came out when a lot of other rodeo themed movies were being released.
Really?
So 3 other movies came out around the same time. The Honkers, J.W. Coop, and When the Legends Die are all movies set in the rodeo world.
Huh.
I have not heard of any of those 3 movies.
I wonder if that's intentional.
I want to know who decided on the title The Honkers.
Huh.
Let's go with that one. That's get
the winning ticket.
That'll get butts in the seats. So because of that, in part at least, Junior Bonner performed poorly at the box office. It only earned about $2 million in North America and another $1 million in other countries. It recorded a loss of nearly $3 million. Wow. So I don't know why this movie cost that much in 72. I mean, it's pretty low key. I don't know. Maybe Steve McQueen, maybe he just cost a lot of money. I don't know.
Maybe he didn't want Gene Hackman to have all the money. He wanted to keep all the money himself.
He said, I want to lose more money for this movie. But I feel like 90% of the movies I talk about in the podcast, it always, when I get to the bottom of Wikipedia, it says it made a lot of money. This one, it lost money. But you know, having watched the movie a couple nights ago, it's not difficult to see why it would lose money. I can't imagine a lot of people walking out of this. I mean, like, I'm going to tell everyone I know to go see this.
Right.
It's just so like quiet and, you know, there's not
very
a whole
docile.
lot
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not quite to the summer movie season yet. We're not to Jaws and Star Wars. And when we get into the 80s, then we're seeing movies move a little faster. I love having guests come on who maybe like aren't as familiar with films of the 70s. I mean, you watch movies today and it's like just watch any movie that comes out today that's not like an indie drama or something, like a studio film, and just count how long a shot lasts before there's a cut.
Oh my God. It's like 3 seconds every time. 3 seconds.
Yeah. Like I'm going to see the new Thor tomorrow with my brother, and I'm going to see if I can find a shot in that movie that lasts longer than 3 seconds. You know, and then you look back,
money on it.
And then you look back on films. It doesn't matter the genre of like 71, 72, and like shots will just kind of linger for a while, and scenes will go on for 5-6 minutes. And today it's like get into the scene, get out of the scene, 2 minutes, go. Yeah. And some movies I like that. Like some movies it has to be done that way, but then other movies I feel like, come on, we can let's take our time with the story. Let's not rush. Let's not just go crazy here.
When you get those really quick shots, I always think that you're not giving enough time for the actors to kind of act. Yeah. You know, you're giving them enough to say the line, but when you have those shots linger, they kind of like, you're kind of saturated with the fact that, oh, these are people, you know. Yeah. This could be a real person.
Yeah, I feel like that's why today, especially, a lot of actors prefer to be on stage, because that's where you can really create a character and perform, right? And without any distraction. And in so many, especially studio movies now, a performance is basically just created in the editing bay. Like we're not really letting a performance linger. Outside of course, you know, every year we're getting a lot of great work that goes against that, but in terms of especially like studio movies that are expected to make money, typically we're not lingering on a lot of shots of the actors. So that's something that Junior Bonner has going for it. So let's see. Though the film was unwisely promoted as a typical Steve McQueen action film, critical reception was still fairly good, not enthusiastic. Peckinpah would remark, "I made a film where nobody got shot, and thus nobody went to see it." I
saw that too.
Did you see that quote? Like, I feel like if I walked into this movie in the summer of 72 and I had seen Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs, you'd be watching this movie, waiting for the scene where things go insane. And we get a little bit of that in that bar brawl, but it's not the action violence we get in those first two movies.
It's more funny. It's more like, oh, this is hilarious. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
At least from my perspective.
So stinging from the financial failure of this movie, but eager to work with Peckinpah again, McQueen presented him Walter Hill's screenplay of The Getaway, which they would film just a few months after completing Junior Bonner. The second collaboration proved to be a very financially successful film, as it would become one of the biggest box office successes of their entire careers.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. Like that they would make a movie, it comes out in the summer and it fails big time. Mm-hmm. And then in December, the same year, they have a second film together and it's one of the biggest hits of both of their careers.
Huh.
So that's nice. That's like at least on like a New Year's Eve when the clock struck midnight, they could feel good about their life.
Yeah. At least the year of 71.
Nobody likes a flop.
Nobody does. No. Yeah.
There's a great Nora Ephron, the great writer-director Nora Ephron has this book where she talks about flops, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, flops are good. You learn from a flop. You learn what went wrong, and you can make it better the next time around." And she's like, "No. Flops are terrible. You don't learn anything. Yeah. You learn that you don't want to make another one." You know. And so they came right around 4 or 5 months later with a hit, and all would be well in their careers. And then lastly, the two quotes to read from critics. Roger Ebert, the great Roger Ebert from Siskel and Ebert, he gave this film 2 stars. Out of 4. He called it a flat out disappointment, despite Peckinpah's track record and his proven ability to elegize the West. The movie simply never comes together and work as a whole. The material is terribly thin. Whereas Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times said, this lively, affectionate contemporary Western, which stars Steve McQueen in one of his finest performances, is one of the most enjoyable pictures Peckinpah has ever made, and surely his most appealing.
Wow.
So that's the nature of the beast when it comes to critics, right? It's like why we have Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. Rotten Tomatoes will have a 98%, but then Metascore will be 58.
It's tricky because back in like 72, there were only a few like really key critical voices in the country. You know, maybe 10 to 15, something like that. New York Times, LA Times, you know, that kind of thing. And now the marketplace is so saturated, it's kind of hard. Like, I don't know about you, like when a movie comes out and I'm kind of interested in it, I'm not sure if I want to see it. Like I might want to read a review or two. I go on Rotten Tomatoes, I don't know where to start.
Right.
There's 1,000 reviews.
Who's credible?
Yeah. I write reviews. And it's like, I don't know if anyone's reading them. But so that's all the background I have about the movie. Did you have anything else to add to that? Like anything else that you found? I did not find the whiskey statistic. I like that.
Yeah, I think it was just, you know, hearsay through the set crew or cast or something like that. But he was like a prolific drinker. from what I'm to pick up from.
Yeah, so I haven't heard a lot of stories about filmmakers drinking themselves to death on a movie set, but like the other famous one I would say is Alfred Hitchcock in the last 2 decades of his film career. I think he was known for at lunch to drink a whole bottle of wine. I've read about that, but like 1 bottle of wine at lunch is still better than 4 bottles of whiskey. Someone's hyperbolizing here. Someone is. In moderation, my friend.
Yeah, it's 2 bottles of whiskey.
Okay, so that takes us to 2 bottles. Imagine. So that takes us to our overall thoughts. So you said before we came on here, you said you overall liked the film. Like, what was your kind of overall take on Junior Bonner?
Yeah, I walked away with a lively spirit. I didn't necessarily think the movie was spectacular. I didn't think that Most of my dislikes were the cultural placement of it. There was a lot of you see a few notable Confederate flags. You see there's not it's all ego. There's little character nuance. There's in the ending, plot wise, just kind of ended. There was no big revelation. There's no Steve McQueen moment where he's like, yeah, I'm gonna buy my dad a ticket. He just kind of did it and then left. He just does it and then left. Yeah. There's not a lot given. But what I liked about it was it made me laugh a lot. There was a lot of kind of funny small town nuance to it. One of my favorite lines is in the bar fight scene. The tallest man in there who's carrying a guy on his waist. He goes up to the band. He says, I think it's time to play something patriotic, fellers. And they start playing the Star Spangled Banner. And I cracked up. It was such a wholehearted moment that he knew how to diffuse that situation where everyone just stops fighting, puts their hat on their heart, and that's the end of it, But I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I think the thing I liked about it the most was seeing Sam Peckinpah work in a medium, in a genre a little bit outside of his wheelhouse. Having studied some of his other violent films, it was kind of nice to see him do something different.
Yeah.
But I did think watching this, I'm like, there's low key and there's very low key. And this is this is one of the most low key movies ever. I just was I'm big on narrative and character development, and I need something that the character wants and can't get. And I need some kind of tension. Doesn't have to be action or violence, but something kind of that allows the story to kind of chug along to its third act. And I felt like a lot of this movie was just kind of hemming and hawing, and there wasn't a lot going on that made me invested in what's going to come next. I struggled with that.
Yeah, like we were saying before, it's really almost about the parents. It's almost about Ace and I forget her name, but it's Ida, the actress.
Yeah, Ida Lupino, who's a famous actress who's one of the few women in the 50s and 60s who was directing. She directed a lot of television. She directed one of my favorite shows of all time. And what?
Which is what?
What
is your favorite TV show by her?
So she is, what did I read about her the other day? It was because I watched this show, Feud, Betty and Joan, which a big part of that series is all about how hard it was for women to become directors. It's kind of like a side thing in that show. And it was so interesting to even see an actor. How old is she? How old do you think she was in making this movie?
She's probably 55, maybe approaching early 60s, I would say.
Yeah, because she's someone I think who was trying to balance both. And the show, it was the Twilight Zone. Did you see the Twilight Zone at all? The old one, the 50s one?
Oh yeah. I love that show.
I think, what did I read? She's the one person who both acted on the Twilight Zone and directed episodes.
Wow.
And so that's kind of cool. That show, I want to say that started, what year did Twilight Zone start? I want to say it was 57, 58-ish, something like that.
I would have said 58, yeah.
Something around there. Really very few women were directing television or film around then. So for her to be in the show and then manage to direct a few episodes, I think is really cool. And I really loved her look in Junior Bonner. I loved how she had a commanding presence about her, and she wasn't just letting men she was just letting, just rolling over and just letting men tell her what to do. And she had her own kind of stance on everything. And that was one of the most interesting things about Junior Bonner, was her character, I thought.
And then her relationship with Junior Bonner too. There was it was in the description of the movie, he says he's got estranged parents, and I'm thinking that's from his perspective, from JR's, but it's almost as if he's got a better connection with his mom than he does his dad, but also it's almost like he's connected with his parents, but his parents are the estranged from each other. And that's where I find the most drama happens in that movie. And that's actually where my attention gravitated towards more than with Steve McQueen's character. I found myself like really like in the staircase scene. I was really invested. I was like, oh man, there's a lot of like heart here, you know.
You can feel like there's a past to their relationship. Like even though we haven't seen it, there's not a flashback or anything. You get you can like kind of feel their backstory there, that they've been through a lot and had their ups and downs. And you know, he's almost begging her to come with him, and she's like, I think, doesn't she like twice in that scene? She's like no. Like
I'm not going to Australia.
Like clearly this is goodbye for a long while.
Right.
But yeah, so I really like that scene. I thought like a lackluster sequence was that rodeo scene. Just went on forever. I mean, what was that, 15 minutes?
Yeah, that was.
I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm not that invested in like the rodeo. So I'm like, what am I supposed to be grabbing onto here rather than just like watch this footage?
Yeah, you know, as a Nevadan born and raised, it's funny that this is the most rodeo exposure I've ever received. and it's an hour and 40 minutes of it, and like I said, you can smell the manure through the screen. It's enough that I can be like, okay, I've been to one rodeo.
Yeah, I was forced to go to the Reno Rodeo last year. I had been once when I was like young, like in high school, and I just like, I got a free dinner out of it, so I went, okay, I'll go. And then but then I had to go to the actual rodeo, and I watched it, and I'm like this sequence in Junior Bonner, it's like revisiting what I just watched last year in person.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not like, I think that sequence needed obviously to be there for the narrative, but I'm just like, like the way it's put together. There's not a whole lot of energy with the camera. That's something I've seen in a lot of films from like 71, 72.
And I wonder
oftentimes these older directors, they like lock the camera off, and we're not really getting a lot of like, you know, energy there.
Yeah, I wonder if it's an aspect of the environment itself, of like, you know, it's hard to gauge the action in the bullpen or the bull ring, or, you know, whatever they call it, when the camera's positioned up at the bleachers. So like you know, Steve McQueen's character, or, you know, clearly his stunt double, is on the bull, you know, hopping and skipping around, it's from a distance. You're not getting, you know, movies nowadays would kind of do a slower shot, you know, kind of get up close and personal with the feelings and the emotions of the character riding the bull. But this one, you just kind of get this guy who's far away, and it kind of just seems like that's the whole story. Is it's very far away.
Yeah.
You know.
So I was like watching this film, I was like trying to grasp things. Did you see when I sent you the link of the YouTube link, it said 2 hours, 20 minutes. I said, you got to be kidding. Yeah. And then I looked it up on IMDb right before I started, and it said an hour 40. And I went, wait, what? Yeah. Like on the YouTube link that I watched, like I assume you did too.
Yeah.
It ends at an hour 40, and then it just starts over again.
It starts over.
And
as if you couldn't get enough.
I can't tell you the joy when I learned that it was an hour 40, because I'm like, like this quiet, low-key Western, and it's gonna be 2:20. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
What a revelation, that hour 40.
Nothing is worse than when I asked a guest if he wanted to come on for a movie called Ryan's Daughter, directed by David Lean, the guy who made Lawrence of Arabia. And that was kind of a quiet, low-key romance drama.
Yeah.
And the night before we were to record, I put the movie on. It was 3.5 hours long.
Oh, wow.
And I went, oh my God. And then like, as the movie started, I get a text from this guy. He was a film critic, and he was like, it's 3.5 hours. I said, I know, please watch it. And he's like, I'm halfway, but you know, you owe me. I'm like, okay, Brian, like just double check before, like if it's obviously a very famous film of the year, like The Godfather, like of course we're gonna watch it and do an episode.
And you're gonna know that it's gonna take some time. Yeah.
But boy, and I say it all the time, like past the 2 hour mark, you better give me something that needs to be as long as it is. Hour 30, definitely. Hour 40, that's fine. Whatever.
Self-contained, you know, that's a rom-com. You know, there's barely any drama. There's nothing that needs a lot of tension building.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a 2.5 hour movie that I watch and I'm like, this easily could have been an hour 45.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think Junior Bonner, I think I think it could have been 90.
You could have trimmed 10 minutes for sure. I think so. The whole
the rodeo stuff.
The rodeo stuff was interesting enough because it's live. It's there's real animals.
It's some of the more like I guess
like,
more life to the movie in that part, but
right. I think the intro scene of the gravel pit.
Oh yeah,
didn't need to be there.
Cut it.
Didn't need to be there. Just
out of the movie.
Yeah.
So let's see. So yeah, I mean, in terms of his directing, I thought Sam Peckinpah, it was fine. Like I was like kind of looking for any like Peckinpah touches or like any cool cinematography. I mean, it was pretty pedestrian. Like it kind of felt like a movie he was directing, with a bullhorn. Like action, like it didn't.
Yeah.
I get in like typically in a movie, you feel when there's some sort of passion behind the making of it. Like you can feel it. Especially today's movies. In 72, there's a similar look to a lot of these films that they all kind of have like but in this one you could tell like it's not a story that he created or like he went after. It's like it kind of felt like a movie that was presented to him and he's like, okay, I'll make this. And
right.
I don't get a sense of like a lot of love here from him.
Yeah, it's more like you said, the pedestrian. Very pedestrian.
I mean, there's so much style and there's such a directorial stamp to the Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs, especially Straw Dogs in terms of like its quietness for about an hour and then it just takes this like psycho like turn. Yeah, you're like, whoa, okay, this movie's going to be a home invasion thriller now. And and the camera's like handheld and roaming the house and like lots of sweaty close-ups on Dustin Hoffman like trying to fight these guys off and you're like, whoa, okay, this is different. Like Junior Bonner, it feels like the work of a director. It's like, no, I'm going to show that I can make something just low-key. And then that failed. So then he's like, okay, let's do The Getaway now.
Let's go back to what I like.
Let's go back to what I like. Performances were all solid. I mean, I felt like Steve McQueen was kind of sleepwalking through this.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a scene of passion. There's not a scene of like, he's just kind of like walking through the movie. He
looks great in some chaps. I'll say
he looks great. Like he can have charisma like he has in Bullet, which is he's just phenomenal in that. I love him in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's not like he doesn't have the charisma of like a Clint Eastwood or like a really like, I don't know. Like there's something about him that can be kind of stoic and kind of hands off. I don't know. And in this one, I didn't get a feel for like what was like heavily motivating this guy and like what he was really going after.
He was really polite. He's just a nice boy,
Yeah. I liked, we haven't talked about him yet. We're going to talk about him briefly at the end of his career. Ben Johnson, an actor I've always really liked. He's kind of like in charge of the rodeo and Junior Bonner has to like talk him into letting him perform again.
Yeah.
He's got a great little mustache and
he does.
And he's now talk about a great presence in any film. Like he's just a fantastic actor. He's very well known for Westerns and stuff. And he had just won the Academy Award for Last Picture Show. He won for Best Supporting Actor. I think that's the only nomination he ever had at the Oscars. So that would have been in the spring of 72. And then this film came out in August. And then he's also in The Getaway. So he's having a pretty productive 72. He's not in the movie very much, but I liked his scenes that he was in.
Yeah, so did I. I think he had a great presence, like you said. He was very charismatic.
Yeah, and like he gives like a kind of an underwritten character a lot of personality, which other actors might not have. And Joe Don Baker was great. Ida Lupino was fantastic, and I mean it's a really good cast. And as I said before, I feel like the setting of Prescott, Arizona, it's kind of a character in the movie that gives it some flavor.
Yeah.
I just wanted more tension in the story.
Yeah. Maybe some more internal struggle. Like what's going on in Steve McQueen's head?
Yeah. Like Monty Walsh, the Western we looked at from 1970, is also a very quiet character study until the last, I want to say 15 minutes. Gets a little violent at the very end. But for like 85% of the running time, it's pretty quiet character study and it's fascinating. And this character is going through a lot of problems and so like Junior Bonner could have been that. I don't know. There's something was kind of lacking for me.
Yeah. And maybe it could be the Peckinpah desire to make a violent sort of thriller
but that was holding back.
What was holding back. So he's like, oh, well, you don't get any character. So
yeah, I think like halfway through production, Peckinpah should have said, okay, you know what? let's halt production for a week. Let's take another crack at the script and let's turn it into a real Peckinpah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just go crazy. I think it would have helped. So let's see. So my last question about this movie, which I ask of each guest, is if they were to make this movie today in 2022, if they took Junior Bonner, the same story, not necessarily the same screenplay, but just like the basic premise and kind of like the basic through line of the story. If they updated it and they made it today, they could set it today or set it in 72. But if they were to make this now, like how would the movie be similar to the 72 version? How do you think it would be different? Like how would the movie be different now with this subject matter, do you think?
I think with a lot of the Westerns that we've seen, especially remakes of, True Grit, 310 to Yuma, especially just within the past 20 years or so, you would see much more character depth. You would see much more. And I think the historical aspect of it would be a little bit more accurate.
Okay.
Or maybe even nostalgic from our point of view. So there would be more 70s tropes to the movie and instilled into it to kind of evoke that sort of, this is an older movie, because if it's going to be set in the same time frame of the 70s rodeo in this small little Arizona town, I think you would want to try to evoke that setting a little bit more.
Right.
That's kind of what I would think.
Yeah.
You get.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they would go after a really great actor for the lead. I don't know. I mean, it would, like, if they were to keep the low key aspect of this, I think it would have to be like a streaming channel. Like it would have to be like a streaming series of some kind, like a Yellowstone. I haven't seen Yellowstone yet. Right. Have you seen Yellowstone? Like I get the sense that that's a little bit more of a low key kind of a Western. It's not like it's not like a Game of Thrones or something like where there's people getting shot and killed every episode, but I haven't seen it yet. So maybe that's from like a little footage I've seen from it.
Yeah.
I get the sense that would be the most success for a Junior Bonner today rather than a 2-hour movie. Yeah. I think the only way this would work as a 2-hour movie if they up the tension in the script and just made it a lot more like interesting in terms of 3-dimensional characters and they got just a like bonkers fantastic actor to play Junior Bonner, like just like a DiCaprio level star to play that role.
I could see Timothy Olyphant.
Ooh, yeah, from Justified.
I think because he's got that great on-screen presence. He's charismatic. He's got
a bit of danger to him
very well. Exactly. He wants to ride Sunshine. I bet you.
Yeah, that I think there's something about Steve McQueen. He's never like. Not to say he has to be scary, but there's nothing kind of like threatening about him on screen. I feel like a Timothy Olyphant, you're like not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, he could be holding a gun under the table, at you the whole time, and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, Justified. That was such a great show. I watched that a few years ago.
That's an excellent.
So I'm kind of with Roger Ebert on this one. I'd give it a 2 out of 4, like a 5 out of 10. Like it was worth a look. I'm kind of a Sam Peckinpah completist. I've seen 4 or 5 of his films and he's great. So, I mean, I think if you want to watch like a low key Peckinpah Western, seek out the Ballad of Cable Hogue. Was that the title? I was forgetting. Cable Hogue. Yeah. With Jason Robards. Great Jason Robards performance in that. I think that film's low key, but it had a little bit more drama, more tension throughout the narrative than this one does.
You can certainly tell from the trailer, because I watched the trailer for it, and it definitely seems like there's more, violent drama that's approaching. You can see like
it's kind of a
after him. He's in with the wrong crowd or something of that sort.
Yeah, and it's kind of a road movie. Like he's traveling throughout a lot of the movie, and you get to see all sorts of different locations, whereas Junior Bonner is kind of set in one place the whole movie. Yeah. So, I would recommend Ballad of Cable Hogue. That's a really good one. But that takes us to our last 2 segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature. So what would you recommend? Something a little bit more modern, like of the last 20 to 25 years, like when Junior Bonner ends, like what would you recommend someone put on right after that is similar in tone or theme or genre or anything like that? Like, what would be a more modern film that you could pair with Junior Bonner?
So I think a great complementary film would be Brokeback Mountain.
Oh yeah,
because I think that movie adds a lot more nuance to character development.
Right.
It has a much more visceral romance story, and it's also set in the 70s. So I think that would add a really interesting contrast to the cultural aspect of Junior Bonner to what Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger perform in Brokeback Mountain, because it's a wonderful film, and that's a 2-hour film, and there's a lot of tension that builds in that movie.
And that'd
be my recommendation.
That's a great recommendation. That's honestly what Junior Bonner needed to be more gay. But you couldn't really do that in 72 at least for a Steve McQueen Western. But Brokeback Mountain is one of my favorite films of all time. That is just one of the greats. And I love the Heath Ledger performance in that movie. It's just it's just on another level. I love that man lived long enough, at least, so we got to see his performances in Brokeback Mountain and The Dark Knight. I mean, you can't get more opposite than those two performances. It's pretty spectacular. And Jake Gyllenhaal is just one of my favorite actors, one of my favorites right now. I mean, he's just like, even in lesser movies, he's just always doing something interesting.
Yeah.
Did you see Nightcrawler? That's one of my favorite performances of his.
That's
he's so great.
Yeah.
And Brokeback, boy, in terms of like texture of like a sense of place, like you really get that sense. And the first half hour of Brokeback is like just a lot of location and just very quiet, speaking low key for that. But there is this underlying tension throughout all of Brokeback, because you're like, you just want these two guys to be happy and to find love and find acceptance. And it's a time and a place where that just couldn't happen, really.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of the underlying tension, and kind of the ending of that movie is so sad. I just can't.
It's really sad.
I can't even think about it. So that's a great choice. So I'm going with this was a very under the radar movie that I saw, because I'm a huge fan of the author of the book it was based on, by Willie Vlotten. Have you heard of the movie Lean on Pete? Came out a few years ago. It's a Western. And it's a quiet character study, kind of a Western, about a teenager who trains and befriends a fading racehorse. And they're basically gonna do away with the racehorse, and he cares about the horse so much that he like goes on a kind of like a trip with the horse, the two of them walking. Wow. And it's a very quiet film. It's Andrew Haigh, writer director of the HBO series Looking, and he made two dazzling movies called Weekend and 45 Years, like two of the great movies of the last decade.
Okay.
And Lean on Pete is just another great one from him. It was a movie. I mean, I want to say it barely got a theatrical release. It's just one of those films like it's like who is this made for? It's just a very it's just a quiet character study, but I loved it, and it was I think it made if it wasn't my top 10, it was my second 10 of that year. I think it was 2018. I want to say it came out.
Oh, okay.
So it's not old. Like, it's fairly recent. I think it came out in 2018. Wow. And Chloe Zhao, who made Nomadland with Frances McDormand, she made a film called The Rodeo, which yesterday I just Googled like rodeo movies. Like, is there something of the last 10 years that I love? And Lean on Pete actually did not come up in that. I thought of that later, but the top choice was The Rodeo by Chloe Zhao, and I'm like, oh my god, I have got to see her movie The Rodeo. I've not seen that movie, so that's on my list. So check out Lean on Pete. Give it a try. It's a really interesting character study, and of course, Brokeback Mountain is a fantastic film. It's not in my top 20. It's in my top 30. That's a great movie.
Yeah.
All right.
I couldn't think of another. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, go ahead.
I couldn't think of another movie that really fit the vibe of that rodeo that was like within my realm of viewership, but that one just like kind of fit so perfectly because there was almost little tension in Junior Bonner. I needed much more tension. Between some cowboys. So,
and what's and so much of this Divine Double Feature segment is about kind of looking at the evolution of cinema and looking at like, what could they do in 2005 that they couldn't do in 72? Like, they could have tried to make Brokeback Mountain in 72, and I just don't think, even if they had tried to kind of like examine a gay relationship between cowboys in a 72 film, it just wouldn't. I don't think it would have been handled in the way that Ang Lee handles it in Brokeback in 05.
Exactly.
And
it's
I mean, the author Annie Proulx, like, she didn't write her short story until 97, I want to say. So I don't think they could have made it in 72 anyway, because the story hadn't been written. But yeah, I mean, it's something we've talked about a little bit. Like, homosexuality on film in the early 70s is almost non-existent. So when I recognize there's a gay character, whether it's like subtext or like we know they're gay, or like we just talked about a horror film called Blackula the other day, and there's these two guys talking in an early scene, and I'm like, I think they're gay. And I came on with my guest, and I'm like, they were gay, right? And she's like, oh yeah, they were gay. And it's like, but they don't say it, so you're like, okay, maybe. But we talked about Shaft last year, the very famous blaxploitation film Shaft, and that has a scene with a gay bartender, and he's proudly gay, and nothing bad happens to him. He doesn't get shot. Like, it's like a wonderful, like, warm scene halfway through the movie.
That's great. Yeah.
You had The Boys in the Band from 1970, a film that celebrates a group of gay characters. So they're out there. They're being made here and there, but it's a tricky time in the 70s for homosexual characters.
When does Rocky Horror come out?
Rocky Horror Picture Show is 75.
Yeah,
that's of course
not
a great
then that
gay
I think
classic.
Yeah, I think then the doors busted open to allow that sort of screen, because they come out strutting with it.
Yeah, if you're interested in the subject, there's this great documentary. I want to say it was made in 95 or 96. It's called The Celluloid Closet. It's like a 2-hour documentary about the history of homosexuality in cinema, and they go all the way back to the silent film era up to the 90s, and they just talk. They kind of like examine cinema decade to decade, and like, what could you do and what couldn't you show, and like, oh, we can't say the word. And it was just like, especially from like 34 to 68, there was this period where there was this production code, and you could not really explore homosexuality in cinema, like, for like 34 years. Like, you couldn't really have gay characters, and if they were gay, you couldn't say the word. And so it's just an interesting, it's so nice to be in, today, even though, some might argue that cinema has gone a little downhill now, when every other weekend you got a big, like, big spectacle action movie. But I mean, that's another conversation. But it's just so nice to live in a time where, like, any subject matter, including homosexuality, can be explored in great depth in a movie, whether it goes to theaters or streams, and
with as much nuance to it,
and you can have nuance to it, and you can let people be who they want to be in a movie. And it's just like you couldn't do that for decades in film, which is crazy to think now.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that takes us to our last segment, Beyond the Flick. This one, we talk about a director or an actor or a genre. So we talked about Sam Peckinpah when we talked about Straw Dogs. So we've talked about him before. I thought we'd just mention Ben Johnson. We are going to talk about Steve McQueen in a few months when we get to their other film they made in the same year. But we're going to get to that one in a few months here. Ben Johnson. So was this like your introduction to him?
Yeah. So this was my introduction for 3 of them. First Steve McQueen movie, first Sam Peckinpah movie, first Ben Johnson movie. So
okay,
I came in completely blind, and
that's awesome.
Really surprised.
And I love your, other people might have said, you know what, Brian, I don't know who these people are. I don't know this genre. Like, can we do another movie? I'm so happy that you just were like, okay, let's do it. And that's how you learn as like a film goer. Like, you like sample the work of a director and an actor that you don't know. And then, like, I'm hoping that this leads to you maybe looking at Bullet, which is a great 60s action film with Steve McQueen.
Maybe said watching it like 5 times in this podcast alone. I have to check it out now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's so good. It's one of my favorite films of the late 60s. It's so fantastic. And of course the Getaway too, I think would be an interesting divine double feature, actually, would be to watch Junior Bonner and then the Getaway, like, back to back. 2 films, same lead, same director, made the same year, and they're very, very different in texture and genre and feel. So that'd be cool too. Ben Johnson was an actor. He worked in a lot of Westerns. He was an actor for many decades. I want to say on IMDb, his first uncredited credit is 1939. And then his last credit is from 1996. a drama with Shirley MacLaine called The Evening Star. So this is someone who was acting in films for many decades. His first like big credit, like the one that I've seen and I know and is really good, is called Rio Grande. He's in the classic Western Shane from the 50s. Other films he's in that I've seen and I adore are Will Penny, Hang 'em High. The Town That Dreaded Sundown is a very like underrated horror film from the mid 70s.
Ooh.
I got the Scream Factory disc a couple years ago, and it's really like a creepy little horror flick that he's in. And he's in Terror Train from 1980 with Jamie Lee Curtis when she was on her Scream Queen. You know, like she did like 6 movies in a row that were all horror films. Like I love that this is an Academy Award-winning actor. He did not shy away from doing horror films, which is really cool. I feel like people of his stature who had done a lot of Westerns, and I could see him being like, I'm not going to do some low budget horror film 10 years after I win my Oscar, but he did. So that's cool. He's in Red Dawn, Radio Flyer, and Angels in the Outfield. I don't know if you've seen it. So you haven't seen any of those?
I've seen Angels in the Outfield.
Yeah, I can't remember who he is in that, but I pulled up like a picture of him in it, and looks like he's like one of the bad guys or something. He's in that film. So my 3 favorites of his are all from this period. We're gonna get to the Sugarland Express in 2 years. Have you heard of that film? Goldie Hawn is the star. It's the directorial debut theatrical film of Steven Spielberg right before he does Jaws.
Really? Wow. I'll have to check it out.
A lot of people think of like Jaws as like his first movie, but he did one before that. And it's like kind of the movie that got him into making Jaws. And that's the Sugarland Express. It's like a kind of a road trip movie, like criminals on the run kind of a movie, kind of a rare Goldie Hawn dramatic performance. And so Ben Johnson's in that. He's kind of like he's like chasing after him. So that's a good one. Number 2 has to be The Wild Bunch from 1969. If you were to see, I would say if you want to see a couple more Sam Peckinpah movies, definitely check out Straw Dogs. Definitely look at The Wild Bunch. That's probably his most famous film, more of a Western. Yeah. Big ensemble cast. Ben Johnson's one of the main guys in that. And then my favorite Ben Johnson movie is the one he won his Academy Award for, and that's The Last Picture Show from the end of 1971. Do you know anything about The Last Picture Show?
No, I heard it's the last one though.
It was my, outside of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which is just like a childhood favorite and just one of the great movies ever. That other than that, that's my Last Picture Show is my favorite film of 1971. It's black and white. Peter Bogdanovich, ensemble cast, Jeff Bridges, Sybil Shepherd, Cloris Leachman, just like Ellen Burstyn, just phenomenal actors through and through. Wow. And it doesn't have like much action, or like, it's kind of a low key movie, kind of in the vein of Junior Bonner, but you are just enraptured every scene. It looks gorgeous. There's a lot of style with the camera. It really brings the movie to life. Watching like a black and white movie from the early 70s is pretty rare. You don't see that very much. And they use black and white to such a beautiful extent. And Ben Johnson, I believe he's in the record books, I believe to this day, the shortest amount of running time ever for an actor who won the Best Supporting Actor Academy Award. I believe he is in The Last Picture Show is 2 hours long. I believe he's in the movie for 9 minutes and 54 seconds. That is the shortest run time of any male actor who would go on to win the Supporting Actor Oscar. I believe
be a really great 9 minutes.
Yeah. He's great. It's one of those performances. He's in and out of the movie throughout the first hour, and then he's not in the second half, but his presence kind of lingers over the characters for the second half. So you still feel like he's there, but like, even though he's not in the second half, like he's still around in a way. His spirit's there. He's just a great presence in the film. He's got this one monologue on a boat on a lake that's just phenomenal. It's like all done in one take. He tells the story of something that happened in his past, and it's just amazing. And so he's great in it. That's definitely my favorite Ben Johnson movie. Whether you're interested in looking at more works of this actor, whatever, check out The Last Picture Show. It's one of the great movies of all time.
I need you to curate me a list for sure.
If you ever need me to curate a list, I'm here for you. All right, that takes us to the end of the show. Devin, I'd love for you to tell our listeners where they can find you online or anything you'd like to promote. Now would be the time.
Well, I'm a real estate agent in Reno, Nevada. You can find me at www.devinbaxterjones.cbselectre.com.
Okay, awesome. Cool.
That's about it.
We'll check it out. Thanks so much for doing this for me. We just met kind of in passing a few weeks ago and got to talking movies, and I kind of like understood that you had like a passion for film. I thought it'd be fun to have you on today, and it was such a treat to have you on and talk about Junior Bonner. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So thanks for being here, Devin. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, for videos about the history of the Academy Awards. Check that out. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.